Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie & Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Good afternoon and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I am your host, Bryan Abercrombie. With me, as always, is Mr. Sam Sanchez. How you doing, Sam?
Yeah, the jalapenos to your nachos, man. Yep.
Yes, the creamy filling to my Oreo cookie.
Yep, I like that.
The icing to my cake. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. The cheese.
The straw that stirs the drink of our little law firm. But anyway, so we were going to talk today about crazy families. Everybody's got one. I got one. You got one.
Everybody's got
the crazy uncle, the crazy aunt. No, just kidding. But we are going to talk about crazy families and some of the legal issues that come up when you're dealing with crazy families. But I guess what kind of sparked our interest in doing a podcast on crazy families was I recently watched the interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with Oprah Winfrey. I mean, I know a lot of people saw that. I think that was a interesting look in the dynamics of a family, a very, very, very well-known family, a very famous and very powerful family across the pond. And then I also, I don't know if you like Britney Spears, Sam?
Yeah, who doesn't like Britney? I mean, like, hit me, baby.
Right. Well, baby, one more time. Britney bitch got. There was a documentary that was recently that I recently watched. My wife turned me on to about Britney Spears and the guardianship that's been in place for Britney Spears for a number of years there in California, and it's a fascinating. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer in California, and neither are you, but it's just a fascinating look at conservatorships in California, and especially a conservatorship over a famous person, and how Britney may be at odds with her dad on this conservatorship, who the dad is in control. And it was just a fascinating look at how the conservatorship came about and how long it's been allowed to be in place. And just, it's amazing to me how that creates, legal issues. And when I last followed up on it, I hear that Britney may be deciding to come to Oprah for a tell-all, because apparently Britney's been pretty tight-lipped about the documentary, but the documentary's, a lot of people have seen it, and it's making the rounds because people, Britney had that really famous stage show there in Vegas that she was making a killing off of, and then all of a sudden it stopped, and things are, they're all, where's Britney? And people are asking questions, and she's got a whole movement to free Britney. I don't know if you're part of the Free Britney movement, Sam, but there are a lot of people that are.
Yeah, I want her free. I want the show back on. The pants are cool. I always remember Britney in the leather pants. That's kind of like the thing. Yes. But or the schoolgirl outfit, right? Wasn't she a Catholic schoolgirl?
Yes,
but yeah, you're absolutely right. Look, crazy family, and it's amazing, to your point, how the family dynamic can create all kinds of legal issues, not just civil issues, obviously criminal issues. But when you talk about entering into the probate realm, really, where you're talking conservatorship, guardianships, these are things that many people really kind of don't understand. Even though they may have executed it when they went to a lawyer and, paid their, $150 or whatever, saying like, give me some documents in case something bad happens to me, and not really understanding the full ramifications of what those releases, what those powers of attorney, durable or statutory, whatever they may be, what the legal impact of those is. And, you get crazy family in charge of you, and then then turn around and say like, hey, how's this working? So it's a good topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, but like I said, I mean, it encompasses all facets. I mean, I think you're talking about everything from, impacts on a custody case to conservatorship and guardianships. You're talking about criminal cases, even sometimes. Let's start first with the Harry and Meghan Markle deal. I mean, obviously, obviously the royal family has, kind of a tailored and very tailored and very, PC response to all of this stuff. So we don't know, obviously, what happened behind the scenes, but Meghan's obviously version of events is, she was kind of, I guess, and for lack of a better word, blindsided by, everything that went on with the royal family, that she didn't know kind of some of that stuff going in. And then, things were said to her when she was pregnant with their first child that, hey, is this baby going to look different than all the other royals? It's going to be more
Is
dark.
it going to be a little too dark?
Yeah, well, it's obviously has been vehemently denied by the royal family, but obviously that had an impact on her. And she was just talking about how the life that she had to lead, she couldn't be herself. She couldn't go out and do things. She, had to follow certain protocols that they expected her to follow. They didn't tell her a whole lot about what was going on. It's just kind of a whole dynamic of, what you're marrying into. So I think, as kind of Oprah put it in the, and I'm not a huge fan of Oprah, but she did put it pretty well when she was asking the questions in the interview.
Just the book club. You're just a fan of the book club.
No, just that, you don't just marry a person, you marry their family too.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of, what she married into, and, kind of how that kind of impacted everything. And obviously it had a negative impact because they're, over here in the States and no longer as part of the royal, official royal family.
Yeah, and not many people are going to marry into a family that does have non-disclosure agreements at the onset before you even, complete your nuptials. But I will tell you,
I don't know about your family, but that's what we do over here.
Absolutely. And she stored up, said, nope, we're getting married anyways. I'm going to say what I want. I was like, okay, babe, whatever you say. But no, really one of the things that, makes that situation so unique is that, the legal constraints that they can place on you as an individual from the family. Now, there are plenty of families that have generational wealth, right? These are people who, there may not even be the Rockefellers. They could just be, plastic surgeons, children, whatever. But they're very powerful families, very affluent families throughout this country, throughout this state, that have that kind of desire, the desire to kind of control image, the kind of, control wealth. And the way they do that is really through legal execution, right? So can you contract to do certain things that your family says you have to do, even though you're not a part of that family, you're marrying into it? Absolutely. Absolutely. You can contract to do pretty much anything that doesn't violate criminal law, in most states. So, when you talk about setting up those types of parameters, I'm not necessarily encouraging every family to run out every patriarch or matriarch to go, okay, now here's the house rules. Let's codify those in a legal document and have everybody execute them before they enter the family. But there are some situations where if you do come from a high profile family, we've obviously represented a few high profile people, athletes and the like, that you want to be able to control kind of the destiny of what could potentially affect, what's making you money, whether it be a persona, whether it be a business, whether it be, a brand image. And a lot of times it's going to take that kind of document, that kind of legal execution. And the frustration is that I feel Meghan's, pain in that situation, because I find it hard to believe that she stepped into that blindsided. Like, I'm pretty sure, she was a star. She had lawyers. He had lawyers. It's not like she didn't watch his mom and all the damage that happened from the paparazzi chasing her, when she passed. All the legal implications, his brother going through suits against papers there in Britain, and so knowing that was kind of the situation, I find it hard to believe that she came in, and it was cold-cocked by this legal.
I did find it interesting that she retained her U.S. citizenship. I think maybe she thought there might have been a couple of red flags in the, because if she was going to be a royal and a member of the royal family and marry the prince, to me, that would mean, okay, I got to become a British subject. She did maintain her U.S. citizenship and everything like that. So my guess is that she maybe saw some red flags or saw something she wasn't completely kosher with or whatever. But I mean, obviously that's speculation on my part, but
sure.
makes
And
sense.
I think it's more likely that Harry like just wanted out. Like, honestly, this was the wild child of the royal family. He was like, I ain't ever going to be prince. I'm second in line. My older brother's going to get it. So I want to party. I want to chase tail.
I think he was
I want to do what I want to do.
I think he was like 14th in line or something, I want to say, because it goes through William's side of the family and his kids. And, I think he's way down the pecking order.
Yeah. So I think he was just kind of like, just let me loose, just let me live my life. And they were like, no, see, like being a part of this group and getting, being on the royal teat means that you're going to comply. And I think Meghan was kind of like, an influence that said like, I've never had to live this way and it's stupid. I mean,
I don't have to comply. I got my own money. I got my own freedom.
Yeah, it's a modern world. I have my own career. I don't have to freaking put up with this old lady telling me what to do. And it's not like,
or the old lady's surrogates.
Right. And so, I feel like, those kind of constraints obviously have led to them.
I mean, I watch The Crown. I know what's up, right?
Right. Yeah. Who doesn't? But yeah, I mean, the legal documentation, the legal restrictions that can be put in place to kind of curtail activity, to curtail personal freedoms, to curtail your ability to discuss family matters. Now, that's one of the things I would tell you. I represented a very affluent international family. And I do recall that part of a prenuptial agreement that we did have a non-disclosure about not only what transpired between husband and wife, but what transpired between husband's family and wife. His family was kind of big manufacturing in Mexico. But he was a U.S. citizen and they were living in the States. And so there was just a lot of like, he was like, you're not going to talk about any of the family business, trade secrets, whatever that may be. And so there may be that type of situation as well as you run into.
Yeah, I represented a family one time where my old boss did when I first started practicing law. And this particular family started one of the biggest airlines in the world. And this thing had a family trust. And there were all sorts of, parameters and rules to follow within this family trust in order to get your payout. And we represented one of the beneficiaries. And it was a pretty strict, and now that brings up a good point. It's like a lot of these very, very well-to-do families have family trusts. So if you're marrying into a fortune, you may not be necessarily marrying into the fortune. You may just be marrying the person, the individual. The family trust may control everything. And, they get a certain amount of payout from the family trust every year. And you're not going to ever become part of the, whatever conglomerate fortune there is. You're
not going to be a Vanderbilt. Damn it.
Right. You're not going to be a Hilton Vanderbilt or Hilton or whatever, because there's all these, there's a family trust in place and they lock that money down within the, I guess, for lack of a better word, within the bloodline, so to speak. And the people that marry into the family, obviously they get, they get what the spouse gets and things like that, or they get in that arena, but they don't necessarily get to the whole fortune. So, and like you said, there could be all sorts of rules and strings attached to that money, and you might have to conform yourself a certain way. And if you didn't sign up for that, I mean, that's something that really probably has to be discussed at least before the marriage, right?
Absolutely. I tell clients all the time who come in and they want to control wealth. I call it, a dead man's hand, right? You want to control wealth from the grave. You're gone, but you're still pulling the strings. And you can do that. You can set up a trust. You can do it through a will. You can do it through the combination thereof and how you set up and establish your assets. You can say, hey, these are the things that I want my family to do or not do. And so long as they're compliant, then the money will continue to rain down. But the second that they're not, then it's gone. It's like, water in the desert. It just evaporates.
And yeah, that's what I kind of took away from the Meghan Markle and Prince Harry interview was that, okay, once you officially want to step out of the royal family limelight and take a step back, then money stops because you're no longer part of the royal family. If you're not going to accept the responsibilities of going to the ribbon cuttings and the speeches and the charity events and all that kind of stuff and, represent the family, then, you're out the door. And so basically Prince Harry gets cut off and, the only money he has left is what he gets from, what he got from his mother's estate.
Yeah. Which is obviously, I mean, her estate was fairly substantial. So he's not hurting for money, but I did see that he took a job. So I was like, hey, wow, it's got to be weird for him. Although
he's one of us now.
Got to pay income tax and everything. He's been in the military. He's been fighting stuff. He's kind of a worker bee. So he seems like the most realistic. And honestly, I think that what I got most out of that interview that I'd never seen before, at least I'm not a big royal watcher, but watching that interview, he was very candid. I mean, in a way that I really don't see most celebrities, or especially like royal family members,
Right.
talk about, emotional vulnerability, emotional issues, financial issues, the impact of like inner family relations. It really was very intriguing to kind of watch and see, like, whoa, this guy's
it's
like,
definitely different from the English stiff upper lip, right? They always talk about.
Yeah, he's like, I'm an American now, so we can screw that upper lip stuff.
Okay, so that covers that. But I guess the point being that if you marry into someone's family, you kind of take on some of the rules and the customs of that family, and sometimes they can be pretty severe, and sometimes they can be sometimes most families are laid back, but you're not just marrying the individual, you're marrying into that family.
That's absolutely correct. And it's not just royalty, right? It can be married into like a very devout Muslim family.
Right.
It could be, married. It could be tied into religion. It could be tied into business, like I said, that would trade secrets. There's a myriad of things that potentially can put those restrictions. And what I would encourage clients, people, listeners to do is, if you're presented with that situation, you love this person. First off, you really got to decide. Like, if it's love, then screw the money. That's what I'm going to tell every client. But if you look at it and you say, well, yeah, I love him, but I don't want to put myself at a disadvantage later on should something happen, and then I've foregone all this stuff for my family, my children, because now we have children together, what does that mean? So I'd really encourage you to seek competent counsel, have somebody really who does that type of law, review that document before you go and execute it. It doesn't mean you can't marry that person. It may just mean that you're going to have a contract negotiation, right? Because the foundation of marriage, civil law, contract law, you're going to have some negotiation before you execute anything, so that they know, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm absolutely in. It's not that I don't love him, but the business side of me is saying, like, we're having a business conversation over here that doesn't have anything to do with me loving, your son or daughter.
Exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I couldn't agree with you more on that. I mean, and especially nowadays when there's, like you talked about, I mean, sometimes there's, people are marrying more and more these days across religions and across maybe sexual orientations and things like that. There's so many different things that, could potentially trip up a family that, brings out, inner prejudices or whatever. And so it's really something that you have to look at and have that conversation with your spouse or your future spouse about, hey, I had a client one time whose family was Jewish, and he married a Muslim woman, and that like created a huge rift in the family for years that they finally were able to get patched up. But I mean, that's in some parts of the world, that's very, 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 very frowned upon. For lack of a better word.
Irish, Protestant. I mean, you're talking about a Catholic family. They're like, no, that's not having it. I mean, it just runs the gamut. So you're right. It can be a whole myriad of things.
I mean, people are people, generally, if they're going to not like you for some reason, they're probably going to not like you for some reason. But I mean, I think it's important to have those conversations about, okay, what's your family like? You are, I'm not saying it should be an impediment to marrying. If, like you said, if it's love, it's love, but it shouldn't be, but it at least should be a discussion. So, what you're dealing with. Everybody's got a crazy family. There's always something crazy going on in every family. There's warts under every rug. So,
well, it's like we tell, clients, Brian, right? So you tell them like, hey, you never plan to be divorced. When you're in love and it's new and it's fresh and you're like, hey, I'm going to marry this person and it's forever. But, statistically, that is a very rare situation. It just
sure
is. And so you should at least go in, if you're going to have to execute something legally, with eyes wide open.
Definitely. So let's talk a little bit about our favorite
the rest
pop
of the
star.
Crazy family.
our favorite pop star, yours and mine.
First and foremost, watching that documentary, I got to tell you, like, it really made me feel extremely sad that an individual as talented as Britney Spears, or any individual really, I mean, not just her, but in this instance, we're talking about her, that talented, all of a sudden looks over and says, I love it. No, I love it. Says, hey, you know what? I'm going to turn over my free will. Like, I am now an indentured servant, because that's what she was and is.
Essentially.
They were like, yeah, you keep working and making millions, but don't worry, sweetie. we'll make all the decisions for you. You don't have to pay a bill, but you can't, spend it how you want to. You can ask me and I'll tell you if you can spend it that way. So it is really an interesting dichotomy. When you talk about guardianships, I guess let's lay that foundation, brother. So, when you talk about a guardianship, what is the purpose of a guardianship typically? When do you get them, right? It revolves around capacity, an individual's ability to provide or make decisions for themselves, right? So if you get in a situation, whether it's emotionally or physically, you can get a guardianship. So let's say someone is like incapacitated, they're in a car accident, now they're immobilized, so they can't go get groceries, they can't do banking, even if you're online now, you may be able to do it that way, but you just lack the ability to do that. You need somebody to help, somebody who has legal authority to sign your name, to pay your bills, to do the kinds of things that you need done. It can be tremendously helpful.
And I think it's important to differentiate between, a guardianship of the person and a guardianship of the estate. So a guardianship of the person is typically, okay, I'm going to decide what you're going to wear. I'm going to decide what kind of medical care you get. I'm going to decide where you live. I'm going to decide what what your 3 square meals a day are. I'm going to decide if you have to take a multivitamin. Any number of different decisions of the person that need to be made. A guardianship of the estate, you're talking about any financial transactions. Can I sell your house? Can I sell your car? Can I can I invest your money the way that I see fit? And that's, I think that's probably the biggest deal with the Britney Spears case, is that it's a guardianship of the estate. And we're talking about an estate that's worth in excess of $60 million. So you're talking about rights to music. You're talking about, money made from stage shows. I mean, she was making somewhere in the neighborhood of $52,000 a show or something in Vegas or something. I mean, just an insane number.
$6 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, it was just an insane number. And, like you said, I mean, this thing, what strikes me as extremely odd about the whole thing is she literally can't decide if she wants to go, travel to Hawaii and spend a week in, at the Four Seasons. They can say no. She can't do it. She's got the money. She's got the ability to travel. She's obviously healthy, in terms of physically healthy. She's able to travel. Now, the only thing that struck me as a little cautious about this thing is I saw one of the lawyer that wanted to represent her was interviewed, and he went to the court to petition to represent her. And the judge said, I'm not going to let you represent her because I don't think she has capacity to hire you. So, and he was relying on a report that to my understanding, or to the best of my knowledge in the documentary, that report was published, reported to the court 10 years ago. I don't know if it's been updated. I don't know if she's had further mental evaluations. She's been under this conservatorship for years. And I mean, if you read the tabloids, I would think she was pretty out of control with the custody issue with her sons and her ex-husband and the divorce and everything, at that time. And maybe that was necessary at the time, but then you have to talk about when is the time to review that? When is there a time for a least restrictive alternative? Is she capable of doing some of this stuff? I mean,
yeah, brother. I mean, and here's the part that got me was, okay, so I can't tell you how many times I've represented individuals who lose their frickin' mind through a divorce. They lose their frickin' mind. They stop being the person that everybody knows them as because they're in this emotional tumult that they can't frickin' see their way out of until we get them to the end. And then all of a sudden they wake up and it's like, oh my God, I'm the person that I was before. And so the fact that, they went in and were able to get a guardianship. Now, trust me, she did some crazy shit. Let's just be honest. I mean, she did some crazy shit, but did it warrant what they did legally to her? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not there.
I mean, I think they had some allegations that she was getting she was going to maybe potentially get fleeced by somebody. Some manager came in and wanted to take over and all that stuff.
That's like every star in Hollywood. Like, how many times do we hear their business manager ran off with millions of dollars? They don't get a freaking conservatorship on them. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that part of the documentary really just kind of got under my skin because I was like, freaking let her go. You know what I mean? Like, let her do what she does. And if she makes a mistake, a colossal failure of it, guess what? She's like every other person on the planet. If she's sentient, if she has capacity. And I agree with you. When the judge said, hey, I'm not going to let this attorney represent you because I don't believe she has the capacity to enter into a contract, but she has the capacity to go out and perform nightly and make millions of dollars. What the hell?
Sell products.
How is that?
Endorse products.
Yeah. Do commercials. Yeah. Like, she can work her ass off, she's got capacity to do that, but she doesn't have capacity to spend her own money. That's some bullshit, in my opinion. But hey, I'm not the
Which
judge.
I think is basically, I think from what I gathered, her position on it now is if I don't have control, I ain't doing it. So
yeah, good for her. Good for her.
this money machine, stop
more
it
than enough money. Yeah, she'd sit on her ass and just do like Instagram videos and just be like, "Hey, I'm crazy over here."
But I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, yeah, let's talk about Instagram videos or Twitter videos or what have you. I mean, technically, a guardian can lock that stuff down for you. I mean, literally, you don't have rights. It restrains your ability to do things. So, from what I gathered from the documentary, they really keep a tight circle on her in terms of, interviews she can give, Twitter posts or Facebook posts or Instagram posts that she can put out there. And there's a really tight leash on her. And my concern about this whole thing is the self-serving nature of it all. So you've got dad, who's the conservator, who's getting paid. His lawyer is getting paid. They're all getting paid by the same person. Britney's term money. And then you've got Britney's
she's paying 3 lawyers.
Yeah, Britney's lawyer,
her dad's lawyer, the ad litem or conservator, her dad, and her own lawyer.
And her dad petitioned the court apparently to get a percentage of some of the stuff that she does, which to me is that's really really sketchy, if you ask me. I mean, like I said, I haven't reviewed all the legal documents in that thing, but just from like you said, she's able to go out and do commercials, work her ass off, but she can't manage her own affairs. Give
me a break. Well, and I guess that let's talk about like the legal implications of like the two parts, right? So, there's all kinds of legal documents that you can execute, at least in the state of Texas and Florida, that will give you legal authority to make decisions for other people. And, these can happen at different times. So let's just talk about like a power of attorney, right? People hear all this and they'll say like, well, what does that mean technically? Like I put my son on it. Okay, well, your son can go to the bank and make withdrawals from your bank account. He can buy cars, he can sell property, he can open credit cards. He can do all those as if he were you. That's what power of attorney means. They have the ability, all the legal rights that you have to make decisions financially with your estate, with your money, with your credit, whatever it may be. Or even if we go flip it, now we're talking about a medical power of attorney that's over your person. Well, okay, so what does that, when does that come into play? It's, if they want to call into question your capacity, let's say, a lot of individuals, when they start suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, early onset of that, they'll come in, they'll talk to us and say, hey, we want, these types of documents in case I get to the point where I can't make these decisions for myself. But that's a very complicated situation. So if you have that, when do you step in? And what does it mean? Does it mean that you choose their doctor for them? Yeah, you could. You could change doctors. You could change treatment. If somebody comes in and says, hey, you've got aggressive cancer, we can do chemo, we can do surgery. It's a 50-50 shot. What do you want to do? The person who's standing there who lacks capacity no longer makes a decision. The person with the piece of paper comes in and says, I like this one better, which may not be the course of action that you would have done if you were sentient at that time. Or maybe you still are and you dispute that. You know what I'm saying?
Where we see the biggest, and again, in your experience, at least in our experience, I think where we see the biggest problems in estates are not when the person dies. They're not stealing money out of the estate when the person dies. It's when they get a power of attorney over somebody's finances. And, this wayward son who's been on drugs or whatever for years and years, all of a sudden shows back up, 10 months before grandma dies, and grandma had $1 million in the bank, whenever 10 months ago. And then whenever she passes away, she has $500,000 left. And, this wayward son has a big lavish lifestyle. I mean, and he shows up with a power of attorney that says, oh, I've done this, this, and this on grandma's money. We've seen that. I don't know how many times. I mean, the different versions of that set of facts happens all the time. So if you're going to give somebody a power of attorney to handle things in your incapacity, or make sure because you can have the power of attorney become effective upon incapacity, or you can have it become effective immediately. When you sign one that allows somebody to become effective immediately, they can do anything they want with your money. And you have got to be very, very careful about who you put in charge of that, because, I've seen many, many, many parents get fleeced by kids or different things like that because they've been granted this ability and they use emotional things to get there. Like, oh, I'm upset at you, mom, because you didn't pay attention to me when I was 15, and it's carried over for my whole life, and blah, blah, blah. So they feel guilty and give them the power of attorney, and then all of a sudden they get fleeced. So it's unfortunately a more common tale than you might think.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, but like another example of when you might execute one of these is, let's say you have young children and you're going to travel. A lot of times, parents will execute these types of documents as they travel if they're traveling without their family. So they may give it to not even a family member. They may say, hey, this couple, they're best friends. We're going to give you this, power of attorney over our estate should something happen to us while we travel. Now, obviously, we all know it's fairly safe to travel, but there are, plane crashes, train wrecks, car wrecks. And so, it's a wise thing to consider, but I think you absolutely need to do your homework and really contemplate what powers it is that you're giving and what parameters you want to put in place. Because the cool thing about when you do these is you can target them. One, you can target them spatially. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm executing it today. My trip is going to be 2 weeks. This expires in 2 weeks if I don't renew it automatically. So then your will, your trust documents, whatever it may be, would kick over and take over at that point. Or you could say it's indefinite, to your point, until I rescind it. Until I come back in and I execute a new one, it's going to be in place. Or whenever I'm incapacitated. If I'm never incapacitated, then it never comes into power or into play. So, there's just a lot of things to really think through and talk to your lawyer about as you contemplate, what these are and do I need them? Do I need them for my crazy family? I have a crazy brother who, I really feel is bipolar, and he is in the hospital all the time. And so he's got, when he's taking his meds, he's fine. When he's not on his meds, he's like off the charts. And so, can I do something? Well, you may have to go to court and do what they did to Britney, right? Which is a, compel guardianship, where you go in, you file with, in Texas, that would be the probate court, statutory probate court. It could be a court of general jurisdiction, depending on where you're living, that you go in and you file these documents that say they lack the capacity to provide and care for themselves. Somebody else needs to do it, and I want to be that person. And there's some bars a lot of times to being able to do that. Usually you can't have been convicted of a felony. You can't have been convicted of a crime of moral turpitude. And they're going to want to try to do a little bit, but it's not like it's
normally they'll have some safeguards. We'll appoint an attorney for the person who's subject to the guardianship and have the investigation done, and you have to have a doctor, do an evaluation and say, yes, this person is incapacitated in these particular ways. So, and typically it's the judge's responsibility to find the least restrictive alternative. But, sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't, with our justice system. So,
yeah, now I agree.
Like I said, I think the biggest thing to worry about is the amount of fraud that can take place from the time of an incapacity to the time of a death, or within a situation of these guardianships. I mean, people that are looking to defraud estates typically do it under powers of attorney or those kinds of things, because even under a guardianship, normally a guardian has some accountability to the court. They have to file a report. They have to, notify the court every so often and let the court know what's going on with the guardianship and what's the, what the medical condition of the ward is and what the financial condition of the ward is. And typically that's an annual report, at least in Texas. But, under a power of attorney, they're not typically filed with courts. And so there's no accountability looking over it. And
that's absolutely the thing about it too. I mean, because there's so many variations thereof. So even courts kind of look at it and go, when they see the document, you have a lot of free power, free will to do and delegate these rights and duties. You can do them piecemeal, you can do them in totem. So it definitely.
And so, and I agree with you. I think Britney was totally out of control whenever they put this in place, but has the due diligence in the subsequent years, been done to see whether she really still needs this or not? I mean, she's obviously not a danger to herself. She's obviously not a danger to her kids, so, is she really, does she not know the value of a dollar? I mean, she obviously knows the value of a dollar. She's refusing to perform and give her dad any money because she's not getting any freedom. So, she obviously knows the value of a dollar.
Yeah. Well, and it just seemed like they really put her in a no-win situation. Like they leveraged it, seemed like anyways. And who the hell knows? We're all using this based on, at least what I saw in the documentary, which seemed pretty reputable. But, you know, it seemed like they leveraged her desire to have possession time with her kids to her relinquishing more control
Right.
over the estate, which is just horrendous if that is the case. I mean, and that a court wouldn't look at that and say, like, that just ain't right. I tell everybody there's this ain't right meter. I mean, that should have been pulling the
Right.
judges like this, like that just ain't right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, who knows? I feel bad for her. I feel like if there was ever a time, she obviously has a groundswell of public opinion behind her now that says, hey, at least relook at it. I mean, and do it with some open oversight, because all this has been closed doors, which usually it is. I mean, everybody kind of wants to make a big deal out of that and say, like, well, they're doing this all behind closed doors and nobody knows it should be open to
I
the
was
public.
shocked that a judge in California would do that of all places. California typically is the land of crazy, right? I mean, they let anything go out there.
Yeah, but it just so happens that a lot of times, even in high profile cases, that's when those restrictions will be eased, because there's so much public demand for information that they just kind of look at it and go, okay, well, you're not going to get all of it, but you'll get some of it. Where in the normal Joe Schmoes, the Sams and Bryans of the world, the court's going to say, hey, this is closed. This is it may have a public setting where somebody can come in and like sit down if they wanted to, but most of the time these types of cases have confidentiality, so that type of exposure doesn't really happen, because there's just like you're dealing with financial information, you're dealing with stuff that has implications for people's estates and money and their personal potential health information, which is obviously protected as well.
Right. So I just like I said, I guess the cautionary tale of all this is we may not have Britney Spears money, but you may have some money, and I mean, you may want to protect that money as much as you can. So be very, very conscientious about the people that you put in charge of and what powers you give them. So it's not, I mean, granted, there's a lot of standard forms in Texas when it comes to powers of attorney and things like that, but you can delineate which powers you want them to have and which ones you don't want them to have. And you can, like you said, you can delineate when you want it to be effective and for what period of time. And, if, I had a client recently, we had to revoke and the revocation of it. You can revoke it at any time. We had to revoke a power of attorney that he had put in place in favor of his wife that was extremely favorable to the wife in terms of anything she could do. She had control over, and she could have really taken him to the cleaners on that. So we had to file a revocation of that. But, like I said, it's worth talking to a competent attorney to discuss, the issues and who you're going to put in charge of that stuff, and really, really have a heart to heart in terms of what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, especially, obviously money matters, but to your person, we started this conversation, it was about crazy family. Look, everybody is a little crazy. And, I know I'm crazy, and I'm the craziest person in my family. So I know that, there's certain things that, I want, and there's certain things that I don't want. And so as I consider these types of documents, I really thought through who would be best to follow my wishes in relation to that. And how do I structure those documents to ensure that happens? Because, once you open Pandora's box, it's very difficult, as Britney has found, it's very difficult to close it. Once you give up these personal liberties, these individual rights and freedoms, this decision-making process to someone else, and a court approves it. Courts are like trains or big steamboats, right? They're like the Titanic. It takes a lot of time to turn that freaking boat around, because it's established a pattern and a history and momentum. And courts, like I always tell you, that courts can be lazy. They'll follow the path of least resistance. And forward, when you're moving forward, is the path of least resistance. Turning around is very difficult. So, really think through that process. I just encourage everybody, like you did, to really spend some quality time thinking through it before you do it.
Yeah. And, we talked about, obviously to relate this back to crazy families. I mean, there's, blood is important, and, your family is supposed to love you. But you can't pick your family. And so sometimes they don't necessarily have your best interest at heart. And sometimes when they're, especially in situations when there's substance abuse or other external influences in the, affecting that person, they may not have your best interests at heart. And, you really, really, really got to look at your family and say, okay, these are the people that I can rely on in the time of need. And these people aren't necessarily, people that I can count on. And
yeah, you may love them, but you may not like them, right? So,
right.
and if you don't like them, do you want them to kind of roll the roost?
I mean, some members of my family, I want to spend every waking minute with. Some members of my family, I want to be out of there in 3 hours. So
click. I'm talking to you. All right, you got 30 seconds. Click. We're done. All right, it's good talking to you. Next year. But no, you're absolutely right, bro.
So yeah, but like I said, I mean, everybody you marry into these families, and you can't pick them, and so you love the person. And the other thing is, I've seen, and you've probably seen this too, many families being torn apart by over somebody in the family who's over influential on the married couple. Whether it's a parent or whether it's a sibling or whether it's somebody just driving a wedge in. I've seen those kinds of situations too. So where these people most likely wouldn't be getting a divorce, but for this interfering sister-in-law or this interfering mother or father or whatever that just wants to control every situation. And, the spouse is looking at this and like, man, if you never left your daddy's house, how am I ever going to, how are we ever going to have our own life, our own relationship? And, it's tragic when that happens, but it does happen. So, those are conversations because like I said, every family's got stuff. There's no Beaver Cleaver family out there.
If there is, like it, yeah. It's a modern age, man. Everybody is, and it's like I'll tell anybody this, and I really truly believe it. It's that you want to complicate a relationship, introduce two things, right? You introduce any type of addiction, and you introduce money, whether it's that you don't have it or that you've got too much of it, or that you want to spend it one way and somebody wants to spend it another way. Look, brother, there are plenty of things that say that money is the root of all evil. Well, it's not necessarily true because everybody loves money. But I would just tell you, like, it can be without controls, without direction, without, some type of supervision. Money can ruin any relationship. And power is probably the third facet of that. And so when you talk about these things with blood, right, is, I love my sisters, man. I love my little brothers. I mean, they're amazing people, but I'm not going to give them my checkbook. I'm not. I mean, unless I absolutely have to. And it's not that I don't love them or trust them, because they're fantastic people. I just know that I like to do things a certain way when I want to do them. And they may not agree, right? That's because we're two individual people, whether we're related or not. And so, you talk about that in any facet: blood, money, power. These are things that can absolutely complicate already complicated relationships, because we know family is complicated. At least mine is. I know yours is super simple, brother, but mine's wicked complicated.
We got we got all kinds of issues over here. I mean, there's like you said. I mean, it's you really just have to have these discussions and go in there with eyes wide open, because you marry into someone's family, you get what you get, and and then you've got to be on the lookout for, individuals who might be looking to take advantage of you. And sometimes, unfortunately, those individuals are in your own family. People have their own selfish interests in mind a lot of times.
Yeah. And you got to flip it too, because obviously, as a good brother, a good sister, a good parent, a good, child, you're going to look around and when your family is freaking crazy. Like, you're looking at them, they lack capacity. And what I'm going to encourage those individuals to do is don't shy away from it. Like, if you identify it, then take measures to help protect them, protect the estate, protect their person. And if that means you have to go to court, you have to hire a lawyer, you have to go in and force them into that process, like Britney was forced into. And maybe I don't agree that she was the right person to do that to, but maybe at the time she was. And if you're encountering that, then I would just tell our listeners, hey, then don't wait. Like, hire a lawyer, get into court, get some relief and protections in place for that individual. If you care about them, if you love them. So let's take her father as an example. Take him at his word. Let's say he did all this stuff to protect her, and he still is. If she really is off her rocker, she's like, really having emotional issues, and she's up and down, she's bipolar, she doesn't take her medication, who the hell knows? Then guess what? He did all the right things. Yeah. He preserved a multi-million dollar, $60, $70 million estate for the benefit of his child, who he obviously loves, and that he should be compensated. Well, anybody should be compensated who's doing that much work. How much? Well, that's for debate. But so those are the things that I would just tell you. There's a flip side to this coin. Now, obviously, we're saying, like, be careful. But on the other side, don't wait. If you see a family member who's, a loved one who's struggling through these processes, and you're like, man, I just don't know that they have the capacity to be able to do this stuff, then, help them. Try to get somebody in there who can try to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, he should be, if he took all the right steps at the right moments and preserved, an estate that was either getting taken by sharks or, being swindled or being just, I had a case one time where a family member did have to take out a guardianship because the lady literally lost her mind. And, she had some money, but she didn't have private jet money, but she was trying to buy a private jet. She was trying to get a limo, and all these kinds of things because, some boyfriend had gotten in her ear and wanted her they wanted them to live this lavish lifestyle. So a family member did take out a guardianship in that situation. And she was burning through, $25,000 a month. And she had money, but she didn't have that kind of money. And so they were able to get that stomped down. And now she has, enough money to live on for the rest of her life because she had a significant brain injury, through no fault of her own, and received a large settlement as a result. And unfortunately, there was a lot of grifters out there. And, this family member stepped up and became the guardian, didn't want the money, didn't want to take the money, was a very, very good person, church going and all that. They got they got a modest amount of money for the amount of work that they did, and, preserved her estate. And she would have lost it all had that person not stepped in. So there is, like you said, there is some good that can come out of these things. So like you said, if you see a situation where there's a huge problem, sometimes you need to step in and do the right thing.
I would agree. So,
all right. Well, anything else to add?
No, I think that's a great topic. I think it's going to be ever evolving. I'm going to pay really close attention to, the hearings in relation to Britney and whether or not we get to free her, and what transpires. And also, now that, I'm intrigued by Harry and Meghan's adventures in the States, and we'll see how that goes as well. So looking forward to seeing how those two situations evolve.
And I would just add that, as we get more, baby boomers reaching the ages of, retirement and, and inevitably death and different things like that, it's going to be up to yours and my generation, being the Gen Xers, of, how we deal with those things. So, as our parents reach those ages and, those become things that we have to deal with. And, that's just going to become more and more prevalent as the years go by.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Something that every family is going to have to deal with at some point.
How can they get a hold of you, Sam?
You can reach me in Fort Worth or the Metroplex at 817-914-5470. That's directly. You can reach the office at 449-844-7181, or you can obviously hit me at the website at www.astxlegal.com.
And for me, I'm down in the Woodlands. We do all of the Woodlands in Houston area. Well, really, we do almost anywhere in Texas, but primarily Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston metro areas, and in Austin area. So my
Miami,
office number,
if you want to catch us in Miami.
Yeah, you can catch us in Florida. We got some work down there as well. So my office number is 281-374-4741, or you can get me at 214-724-6106 or at www.astxlegal.com. So thank you again, Sam, for the time, and I'll let Britney take us off. All right, have a good one.
Next time, brother.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.